I think it's very, let me join the custom of also welcoming you people and saying that I am deeply, deeply delighted to be part of this, especially when I got to know that this is the first time you're doing it. So I feel humbled that I had the privilege of being invited to be part of this. I think I must join other who spoke before me to say that we must commend those of you who, in spite of even the strenuous challenge of academic pursuit, have seized this moment to organize this. I think we are deeply grateful. This event not only rekindles, in my view, the ideals and the tenacity of the forebears who, as diaspora students, you've heard from the professor, under different umbrella, contributed immensely to the independence and liberation struggles in Africa, thereby fulfilling the Pan-Africanist dream of independence for African states. Furthermore, in a continent where most people are more preoccupied with the issues of survival at the local level than taking a continental or even regional approach to dealing with the multifarious problems that confront us, I dare say that your efforts at focusing on understanding on the emergency of the moment and urgency of our collective intervention place you and several others who think like you as the hope for the emergent Africa that we all look for. But let me confess from the outset that my intervention at this session will be an attempt to break with tradition just a little bit. In most fora like this, the usual format will involve several speakers reading from their notes at great length before allowing a little cramped time for questions and comments. Instead of following that line, I would only attempt a couple of key highlights for possible discussion and feel that at the end of the day, all of us should now think of how the solution should be. So you become more important to the answers as I become. That's the way I felt. But before then, perhaps I need to say a little bit about some of the issues and my experiences. The invitation to me stated that the imperatives of this gathering was, and I quote, how the ideals of Pan-Africanism could inspire the new generation of African leaders and youth in addressing the multiple challenges of the 21st century. Noting, as I've done earlier, that these are similar to the ideals that generated the very concept of Pan-Africanism, let me say again that I'm gratified that the fires that lit the breasts of our forebears and propelled them on a journey to find common solutions to the multiple challenges of Africa then, which included slavery, colonialism, and discrimination, through united efforts are still alive today. So we can now gather here today to examine how we can confront these new forms of challenges. These challenges, such as environmental crisis, climate change, poverty, famine, HIV/AIDS, and others, are all handmaidens of the neoliberal world order supervised by the process of globalization, which has made a forced entry into our daily lives. What has to be realized, however, is that globalization itself is not an entirely new concept or tool. Africa and Africans have passed through several eras of globalization. After the era of globalization of slavery, we were confronted with globalization of colonialism and imperialism, then to the era of economic globalization. Realizing that the real driving force behind slavery and colonization and colonialism was the urge to capture and exploit both human and natural resources of Africa to provide cheap labor and raw materials to whet the appetite of the global powers. It would be safe for me to say that globalization in all its forms has only enhanced the ability of those who control the levers of global power to reorganize global institutions and global affairs to fall in line with their interests instead of the global interest which it pretends to propagate. So my first challenge to this audience will be to think about what somewhat unpredictable extensions we are seeing to globalization as we discuss the key theme of environment and natural resource management. What appears a more compelling challenge posed by the neo-globalization, as I call it, or the economic phase of the of the globalization is that the scramble to exploit natural resources is often expressed as being in the interest of, in quote, our development, but as it has deadly consequences on our environment and livelihoods. In some, if not most cases, it is expressed in the name of partnership or trade agreements by which multinational companies with their local collaborators virtually seize lands, privatize rivers, commoditize forests, and exploit mineral resources with wanton disregard to the interests of local communities. This whirlpool of a gold rush, whether oil or minerals, takes direct toll on the environment and natural resource depletion, resulting from poor environmental governance and resource management. The environment, as we all know, is man's first right. For even before we became life in being, susceptible to deprivation, we existed in and because of an environment. The effect of the violation of our environmental rights, therefore, is omnicidal. Once the environment dies, everything else dies, because life itself and other things that sustain it depend on the environment. This is more telling in the case of Africa, where there is a Pan-African view of the environment which stretches beyond the frontiers of flora and fauna, or even sees more than even seeing land as a mere factor of production to be exploited. To our peoples, as with most indigenous peoples the world over, our land, forest, vegetation, and rivers are the abode of our ancestors and gods. The desecration of certain forests, killing of certain animals, are believed to spell doom to the community. And so the communities must stand up to defend their livelihood, not just because they feel flora and fauna have been desecrated, but because that is the essence of their being. It is against this backdrop that current concerns about the environment and environmental rights are being driven by a rapidly increasing awareness that the limited resources of our environment, if further abused or depleted, can rapidly degrade to the point where they threaten our health and lives in ways not fully anticipated. Communities affected by incidents of environmental damage feel a far deeper burning sense of injustice and challenge governments and companies on two overarching questions. One, their right to enjoy and make determinations about an environment that is conducive to all aspects of good health, spiritual well-being, and development as conceived by them. And I underline that word, development as conceived by them. Most times, development is always expressed as what someone feels it should. So forests should go away, and they say that is development because we are going to build something. And two, the rights of future generations to enjoy an environment which have not been jeopardized by the actions of those using resources at present, which has come to include biodiversity, pollution, climate, and the exhaustion of natural resources. It was therefore a salutary development that the African Charter on Human and People's Rights set out in Articles 21, 22, and 24 the right of all peoples to a generally satisfactory environment favorable to their development, the right to economic, social, and cultural development, and the right of sovereignty over and to the benefit from the advantages derived from natural resources. The fact that these have remained largely declarations, without clearly defined and enforceable standards and mechanisms for enforcement, has stacked enormous pressure against environmental rights of peoples in a number of circumstances. Perhaps foremost among these is the case of extractive industries, which have shown a capacity to diminish human and environmental rights on closely related fronts. Speaking about, I think a question was raised here about the African Union and how they can play a role. I mean, we had one of the most robust provisions in our African Charter on Human and People's Rights. As we said, it not only gave rights to human beings, but to people. So as a people, you have a right, which was quite an advancement on several of its counterparts at that time. But how do you get there?